Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Every once in a while, a moment shows up that allows us to realize the full promise of an integrated and fully realized democracy. We've had these moments in the past, notably with President Barack Obama, but during the recent Trump administration and for the past several years, our rights and ultimately our very existence has been directly threatened in the courts, in state legislatures, and on the streets of our cities, our towns, and our villages. We now have a moment that we have to seize. And that moment is the anticipated nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, and an opportunity to inform and influence down ballot races all over the country. We have an opportunity to elect a progressive, pro-LGBTQ president and the first woman to ever lead this nation. We also have an opportunity for Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries to lead the House of Representatives and for us to retain control of the US Senate. This is a moment that we cannot squander, which is why Emil Wolbekin, Rashad Robinson, and myself got together to volunteer for this effort. This effort is to bring together Black, gay, and queer men from all over the country, from New York to Florida, from Texas to Louisiana, from Pennsylvania to Tennessee. Regardless of where you live, blue, purple, or red, we need to lock arms in this moment to bring victory over the finish line. And to help us do that, we have convened a stellar array of Black, gay, and queer journalists, posters, political leaders, commentators, organizers, and celebrities to provide vital information and resources for navigating the 2024 election, focusing on mobilizing our community to defend, support, and advocate for our interests.
Take us away and give us a charge on how we should be thinking about this moment and what's at stake. Keith?
Thank you, Rashad, and thank you, Emil and Alfonso, for organizing this. It's great to see so many Black, gay, same-gender loving, queer men stepping up to the plate in this historic moment. And I know a lot of you were on the Win with Black Men call on Monday, and that was inspiring and empowering for many people. And now we can micro-target deeper into this community as well. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to march with Dr. King back in the 1950s or 60s, or to work on Jesse Jackson's historic 1984 campaign, or Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, that's where we are right now. We are literally making history. I went to law school with Barack Obama. I worked in the White House with him, and I worked on many campaigns going all the way back to 1982. And I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. The enthusiasm we see right now reminds me of the enthusiasm when Obama ran in 2008, but this is coming together even more quickly than with Obama. $250,000 raised in just 2 days, more than 100,000 donors, clinching the nomination in just one day. It's 2,000 delegates you have to get in just one day. The Congressional Black Caucus, the AFL-CIO, 2 presidents, 23 governors, 41 senators, more than 100 members of Congress came out and endorsed Kamala Harris right away. That's historic. We've never seen anything like that in the Democratic Party, and I've been in the party for 40 years now. We have right now a clear choice, as Rashad was indicating, and Biden withdrawing from the race has really clarified the choice even more for people. This is now a choice between the past and the future, between a 78-year-old con artist or a 59-year-old vice president, an old white man or a young Black woman, a convicted felon or a prosecutor. It's about freedom versus fear. Thank you, Beyonce, for that. And I am really inspired about this because we can see the contrast between Kamala's positive vision and Donald Trump's dark vision. When Donald Trump says he wants to make America great again, that means he thinks that there was some point in the past when America was great. But when exactly was that point when America was great? Was it the 1950s or 60s before Black people had the right to vote or the right to work and live in non-segregated environments? Was it the 1980s or 90s before LGBTQ people had the right to marry. Whenever they talk about making America great again, that means they want to go back in time. What Kamala Harris wants to do is to go ahead in the future, but they want to erase the progress of the 20th century. They've already gutted the Voting Rights Act. They've eliminated affirmative action, college admissions. They've attacked Black history, DEI, critical race theory, trans kids, drag queens, and racial justice efforts. Just yesterday on Fox News, they were attacking Kamala Harris for visiting Zeta Phi Beta sorority. And today they're attacking her for appearing on RuPaul's Drag Race. They're making it very clear that you and I and those of us on this call are not welcome in their vision of America. But Kamala, on the other hand, offers a bright vision that wants to lead us into the 21st century with affordable health care, child care, paid family leave, and medical leave, to work on climate change, to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. You know, I'm really tired of this whole DEI hire slander that they've been using against her, because Donald Trump is the ultimate candidate who came in with no experience. He was the first and only president in our entire history to enter office with no political, government, or military experience. None, zero. And his running mate, J.D. Vance, had no experience at all until he just got to the Senate last year. Only straight white men could get away with that level of inexperience. No Black person, woman, or person of color, or LGBTQIA person with those resumes would ever even be taken seriously as a candidate for president of the United States. And this racist double standard that allows a twice impeached, quadruple indicted, convicted felon, and adjudicated rapist with 6 bankruptcies, 5 kids, and 3 baby mamas, and 2 divorces to be a serious presidential candidate? Can you imagine if I or anyone on this call tried to run for president with that record, a convicted felon and adjudicated rapist? It's outrageous. Kamala's record, as we've already noted, is a dramatic transition from that, dramatic contrast. She has more experience than Donald Trump and J.D. Vance combined. She was the district attorney in San Francisco, the attorney general in California, United States senator, vice president. I mean, she has local, state, and federal experience, and legislative, executive, and judicial experience. That's every possible level of experience in government. You know, 4 years ago, our economy had collapsed. You couldn't find toilet paper in the stores. Trump was telling people to inject bleach to cure COVID. And he was tear gassing peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters outside the White House. Then we had the Biden-Harris administration come into office, and we've had a breath of fresh air. And Kamala has been instrumental in that. They've passed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. They had a record $16 billion in funding for HBCUs, the lowest Black unemployment rate in history, 4.8% just last year, the lowest Black poverty rate in history. They've now forgiven $168 billion with a B in student loan debt for nearly 5 million people, including me. My loans were forgiven, as well as a lot of people I know who were on this call, because of the Biden-Harris administration. A record number of new Black entrepreneurs, the first Black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court, more Black judges, the American Rescue Plan, the Child Care Tax Credit, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the Juneteenth holiday that no one was even expecting. All this happened under the Biden-Harris administration. Trump's agenda with Project 2025 would eliminate the Department of Education, which, by the way, I don't know if people have talked about this. I know this is not a huge issue for everybody, but this is something that needs to be said. If you read Project 2025, one of the things it would do, it would ban pornography. They want to ban pornography. I'm not saying that this is something that is the most important issue in the agenda, but this is something that needs to be acknowledged. They are literally talking about taking away your freedom just to have access to information that's out there. They want to implement stop and frisk. Donald Trump wants to bring back stop and frisk policies that harass Black men in the streets, and he wants to bring qualified immunity for police officers so they cannot be prosecuted when they commit crimes. You know, Donald Trump was the first president since Nixon to appoint no Black federal appeals judges, and Joe Biden, in contrast, appointed 14 Black federal appeals judges. So we have a real choice here. We're going to move forward, or we're going to move backward. I know it's a lot of information. I tried to get it all done in a short amount of time, but I know one thing that Kamala has said that has inspired me, and that's this: when we fight, we win. So let's get out there and fight. Let's get out there and win, and let's go.
We're going to ask veteran prosecutor, recognized speaker, champion for social justice, Paul Henderson, and journalist and author Dr. Neokwadalai Corday to come and talk to us about their personal experiences. They both know the vice president. They've worked with her in different capacities. And so we'll turn it over to them at this point.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure. I'm really actually honored to be here with all of the voices that are on this call and the folks that put it together. But more than a sense of honor for being here, I have a sense of pride just from looking out and seeing so many of us coming together, because I believe our presence is advocacy. I love that we are leaning in on our own to empower ourselves with our presence to be excited and motivated in this election. And so
community that are going to be joining us to talk about more specifically their personal experiences with Vice President Kamala Harris. We're going to ask veteran prosecutor, recognized speaker, champion for social justice, Paul Henderson, and journalist and author, Dr. Nequadalai Corday, to come and talk to us about their personal experiences. They both know the Vice President. They've worked with her in different capacities. And so we'll turn it over to them at this point.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure. I'm really actually honored to be here with all of the voices that are on this call and the folks that put it together. But more than a sense of honor for being here, I have a sense of pride just from looking out and seeing so many of us coming together, because I believe our presence is advocacy. I love that we are leaning in on our own to empower ourselves with our presence to be excited and motivated in this election. And so that's important to me. You know, in this election, I think what's really going to matter is the truth. And there's not a lot of truth out there. And so, you know, I've got some facts and statistics and things that I think are really important, because in this election in particular, the other side and the opponent is untethered to the truth. And we can't fix what we don't talk about, and you can't talk about what you don't know. And so that's why I think it's really important that we all know and are empowered with this information, that we know who Kamala Harris is and what she really believes. I've been along with her for the journey for a very long time, since she became a prosecutor and the elected district attorney in San Francisco, and she made me her chief of her administration. And I will say that was not a small thing, because it made me the highest serving and first ever Black gay prosecutor, the highest in the state that had ever been appointed because of her. And the reason that that mattered is because we had a real diversity problem with prosecution. When I came to the office, I was the first Black person that the office had even hired in 5 years. No interns, no paralegals, secretary. There weren't a lot of people that looked like Kamala or myself. And to do the work that impacted communities of color so directly and so importantly, our presence actually mattered. Putting me in as her chief and allowing me to work with her to build out that diversity, we built up the diversity by over 85% of being in the office. And that's with women, that's with the LGBT community, that's with communities of color that actually matter, to have our voices heard because of her. The same year that she became district attorney, what happened in 2004 was her work with same-sex marriage. What she did, and this is why I think it matters and it made a difference to me and was part of the reason why I leaned into the leadership and her support when they had the marriage equality and they made same-sex marriages legal. She took time off without publication. She didn't tell people. It wasn't for the press. She did it because she believed in it, and she spent her days and used up her vacation time to marry more people quietly, because she wanted there to be a higher volume so that no one had to wait with an official to get married in San Francisco. And I thought that was really important. It meant a lot to me. I really supported her because of that. And it was a sign to me of who she actually was when no one was looking, a sign to me of what she valued when no one was clapping and getting credit for it. And then later on, when we did have Prop 8, she was opposed to it before and after. So on the record, she was opposed to them restricting and taking away our rights of gay marriage in California. And even after the legislation passed in California, what she did was really important, because as Attorney General, she did not defend the legislation. Now that was remarkable and impressive, but it was a big deal in terms of who she is and how she led the state of California to not defend legislation that she thought was harmful. That, I think, matters. One of the other things that she did, we talked a little bit about the panic defense, and those of you that don't know what that is, that's the prejudicial approach that allows juries to not take action to uphold violence against our own community. She's been opposed to that from the very beginning. In 2006, she was the very first prosecutor ever to present on why not having the panic defense was important, and led the nation in having those conversations and discussions. And when she became Attorney General in 2011, she led the effort to abolish the Panic Defense Act. And that's really important. That's how long she's been committed to this work, and how it shows you where her real values are, despite of what you're going to hear and what you've seen or heard in the press in the past. In terms of her role as a senator, she worked for the insurance coverage to get PrEP, so that all public insurance agencies must include PrEP for all of their coverage. And she was the one that released that bill. And that was very important, as you know, in our community. Some of the other things that she did that stood out to me, that while she was senator, I remember the big moments while she was opposing Brett Kavanaugh, that she confronted him with his position and stance on marriage equality, again, as a sign of what her own values are that seem important to me. As vice president, she's continued her advocacy. I love the work that she's done as the Don't Say Gay, and bringing that message to different states and outside of the United States. And you're going to hear from Dr. Corte about some of that work outside of the United States, where her advocacy matters as well. I will say, even personally, seeing the things that she has done in the White House, the pride celebrations that she's had, which both welcome and encourage folks to communicate and network for LGBT leadership, Black LGBT leadership specifically in this country. She's one of the folks that spoke and met with Brittany Griner when she was released. And that, I think, was really important too, at a time when she got released, that a lot of other elected officials didn't want to meet with her, didn't want to talk to her, were uncomfortable by the LGBT issues that were raised concerning her release and her very existence. Kamala was one of the first people to sit down and meet with her, and I think that that's really important. I just think that all of these little things add up. And when you hear challenges to her commitment to our community, we have to have our voices heard, and we have to be able to speak up. You're listening to people on this call that have a lot to say, that know her history, that know the information. Feel free to reach out to all of us to let us know how we can be helpful in your own advocacy. I want to thank the folks that put this call together, and remind people again that yes, your money does matter, because spending your money and giving your money is also a form of advocacy. But let me tell you another important form of advocacy that I think you all must do. Your own presence in social media matters. I'd love to see all of you make a post about these calls and the ideas and the concepts that you're hearing and the facts that you're hearing about today. So post and repost the voices that you're hearing. Follow and listen to the folks that are engaged in this fight, and join us. Your presence here matters. It means so much to me to be a part of this conversation, to be a part of this community. I thank you all for having me, and it's been a real pleasure. I look forward to this victory and continuing to change this country that I believe in. Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for having me. Thank you to Rashad and Alfonso and Emil, and of course, the friends at Bayer Baldwin, and all the brothers on this call, all of our siblings on this call, all the people of conscience on this call. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte. I'm author of the new book, Kamala, The Motherland and Me. It just came out on Tuesday already. It's a #1 new release on Amazon, and it is required reading for this inflection point that we find ourselves in. I want to pick up on something that the second gentleman said earlier when he joined us. He said that Vice President Harris is talking about the future and not the past. And I had the good fortune of being able to have a front row seat to history, to capture that conversation about the future. While overseas in Africa, we had a chance to visit Ghana and Tanzania and Zambia. I traveled with the Vice President and the U.S. Press Corps covering this historic trip. And while abroad, on this trip, the Vice President often said that by 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet Earth will live in Africa. Right now, the average age on the continent is 19. And 2/3 of the folks who have access to the internet on the continent are men, not women. That's part of the reason why digital inclusion has been such a mainstay in the work of the vice president. It's part of the reason why she could have done a trip on public health, humanitarian aid, but she decided to turn the page and focus on investing in Africa, focus on investing in entrepreneurship and the creative economy and the work that's afoot on the continent, combating climate change, using AI-powered technology. When people ask me about the vice president and what she's really like, I oftentimes say to them, she is competent, she's cutting edge, and she's capable of meeting the moment. And I hope that you all come along with me on this journey. You know, this time last year, I was poring over all of my notes after having returned from that storied trip. And now I sit before you as an Amazon bestseller, an author of Kamala, the Motherland, and Me. And so I thought one of the most meaningful things I could do with the time that we have together is to share an excerpt from the book that I think puts an exclamation point behind who the vice president is. You know, it was Dr. Maya Angelou who said, when people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. So I want to give you all a taste of who the vice president really is. On page 64, for the folks who already have the book, I write, next up, it was time for the American Press Corps to ask our questions. I felt an air of anticipation inside as the New York Times White House correspondent, Zolan Kano-Youngs, walked to the microphone and prepared to ask questions that one or both of these world leaders would potentially shut down. With a specific mention of a proposed Ghanaian bill that would imprison those engaging in same-sex intercourse, Zolan asked Vice President Harris about the trip's theme of collaboration and how that reconciled the Biden administration's commitment to calling out foreign governments that have advanced or proposed anti-gay legislation. Even before he completed his inquiry, members of the Ghanaian cabinet made their disapproval apparent. You could see their faces get tight. You could hear the whispers. You could even hear some laughter. Was it nervous laughter? Was it belittling laughter? Was it somewhere in between? I don't know, but the immediate shift in energy was palpable. Despite the angry stares and even some snickers from around the room, Vice President Harris never paused or hesitated in her response. Without missing a beat and standing tall with shoulders arched back, she said, I'll start. I have raised this issue, and let me be clear about where we stand. First of all, for the American press who are here, you know that a great deal of work in my career has been to address human rights issues, equality issues across the board, including as it relates to the LGBTQ community. And I feel very strongly about the importance of supporting freedom and supporting and fighting for equality among all people, and that all people be treated equally. I will also say that this is an issue that we consider, and I consider, to be a human rights issue. And that will not change. That will not change. In February 2024, the Ghanaian legislature passed the bill paving the way for the imprisonment of anyone convicted of identifying as LGBTQ and a maximum 5-year jail sentence for anyone forming or funding LGBTQ groups. Passing of the legislation has sparked an immediate Supreme Court challenge, which the president of Ghana gave as the reason for not signing the bill into law. But there's no denying the economic impact that this law would have on the country, including the potential loss of almost $4 billion in World Bank funding by 2030. In conclusion, it would have been easy for Vice President Harris to duck the question so as not to offend anyone in the room, but at the expense of freedom and dignity of a great many people outside the room. Ghana was the starting point, setting the tone for the entire trip ahead by responding to the LGBTQ question honestly and basically doubling down on her support of gay rights as human rights. She risked pulling focus from other aspects of the trip. What if folks on the continent decided to make this trip about her trying to persuade Africans into being more supportive of LGBTQ folks? She had some ambitious goals to achieve on the continent, particularly by not making this trip about humanitarian aid or public health, but instead about entrepreneurship and investing more in the continent. Her objectives could have easily been derailed in that moment, but she took a stand anyway. She took a stand anyway. That is who she is. And I hope you all pick up this book. I hope you use it as a tool to dispel the misinformation and disinformation about the vice president. And remember, united we stand. There's a famous African proverb that says, if we want to go fast, go alone. If we want to go far, go together. Let's go far, brothers. Let's go further than we've ever gone.